Hi, I'm Tracy Austin with Tennis Channel. It's a pleasure to talk with you all.
Pleasure to have you.
I got to see your movie on Tuesday night, Challengers. So
what did you think of the tennis?
I thought it was so much fun.
Okay, great.
I thought it was great. It was great.
That's awesome.
That was good.
That was the most honest anybody has ever been.
It was
Thank
so
you
much
for being
fun with
kind
all
about
of you guys together. The interaction, it looked just so natural. That's so important, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Zendaya, and we've got Josh O'Connor, we've got Mike Faist. But I want to ask you first things first, what made you want to get involved with a tennis-themed movie?
Oh man, I think the script was brilliant, and I think what Justin does so well is tennis is often used as a metaphor for a lot of different things in life, in relationships, power, and I think also just the prospect or the idea of having to take on a massive challenge. I mean, I speak for all three of us where, tennis is not what we do for a living, and it's not something like you can just pick up. It's not an easy sport unless you have been training since you were like 4 years old, good luck. So I think just the idea of trying to tackle something, that physical challenge, the mental challenge, and discover honestly a new world, like being a part of the tennis world and learning more about it, and was a pleasure. So I think it was a scary challenge, if anything, and also incredibly stimulating emotionally, physically. Challenge.
Yeah, you captured that. The ATP Tour, the Challenger Tour, and I thought that was really a great part of that, the interaction between all three of you. You mentioned last week that you wanted to meet Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
What inspires you about Coco?
Well, many things, but also she's so young, and I can't, I guess I relate to her in the sense that I was very young when I started in this industry, and so I guess I relate to the idea of pressure and, having all eyes on you, but then in many ways I can't imagine the shoes that she has to walk in as a tennis player, as a professional athlete. I remember when we were shooting our U.S. Open stuff at the Billie Jean King Center, I remember being absolutely terrified. And I'm just pretending, I remember feeling nervous and sweating and the whole thing. And I wasn't actually playing. There was no stakes. So I could only imagine. And I'm so impressed by her, her composure and her, strength and poise, and like I said, she's so young, and so I think when I see young people who are in the public space, I just feel particularly protective, and
I love that. So Brad Gilbert worked with you all because you hadn't played tennis before. How difficult was that to learn tennis in such a short amount of time?
Well, it's impossible.
Impossible!
Yeah, it is impossible, right? Because as we were talking about right before the interview, your guys' sport is so nuanced and particular and specific in terms of the technique and the format and, making sure that every alignment is kind of perfect. And it's about drilling those physical movements to the point where you don't have to think about them. And there is a step-by-step thing that you have to follow so you can just go and play the game and get in your kind of state and flow. So it really is impossible for us to be great tennis players.
But Brad did a great job with it.
Well, it was the challenge of it, right? And that's ultimately what Z was really kind of saying throughout this press tour as well. It's we wanted to ensure that we tried our very best in order to make sure that our technique was as accurate as we could be, while, we have individuals that have their own variations on that, and everybody kind of looks different, depending on that, but working as best we could to get that technique is down.
So you love Kyrgios. What do you love specifically about Kyrgios?
Well, I think there's some, I grew up with soccer as my main sport, or football as we call it in the UK, and there's a certain character that would often prop up. So there's players like Eric Cantona, at times players like Roy Keane, real characters who are sometimes behave badly, but sometimes,
the bad boy.
But they're also very talented. And I think Kyrgios has that. There's a sort of, for me growing up, and I did watch tennis, growing up through my dad watched a lot of tennis. And it was like McEnroe was the kind of, you cannot be serious. That whole thing was such a...
Super brat in the UK.
Super brat, is that what it's right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's something really entertaining about Kyrgios. I also, do think Kyrgios is a fantastic tennis player.
Absolutely,
and
so much talent.
There's part of me that's like, I wish he'd sort of tone it down and just focus on the game. But truly that comes from... My love of him as a tennis player comes from this film. And it was like, how do we find a character that I can take stuff from for Patrick? And more than the tennis playing, it was the in-between, that when he's sitting down and resting, he'd do very provocative things.
That's exactly right.
And I find it endearing, like terrible and endearing, and I like that.